here's a really cool pattern in React that you can use when you have some conditional hooks that you can't render conditionally because it violates the rules of hooks. So here we have this user card component, and then we have our first suspense query here, which is basically getting the user here. Because this is a suspense query, the fetching is happening outside of the component, and so we don't need to deal with any loading. Now, this user here can actually be null because that is the response from the backend. We might have a signed in user, or we might not have one. And if the user is null, then we just don't want to return anything from this user card component. But if the user is not null, so if the user is there, then of course we want to fetch some of its statistics, like this XP over here, which requires another suspense query. Now, the problem here, as you can see, is that I cannot call a hook conditionally, right? It violates the rules of hooks. And so how do we get around that? Well, the solution is actually quite simple, but it's very fundamental to how you build React applications. And this is what this looks like. So here we have the same user card component with the same code here at the top, right? If the user is not there, we're going to return null, but otherwise we're going to continue. And now, instead of rendering the second useSuspense query hook, we're instead creating another separate component. This separate component, the user card stats, receives a user over here, but importantly, this user is always defined. That's how we typed this component here. And then based on that user, we run that suspense query here, and then we return the same exact code that we had before. Now, this is really cool because in React, you can't render hooks conditionally, but you can render components conditionally, and even if those components have hooks within them. And that solves our problem because now this user card here is achieving exactly what it wants to do, right? We're first checking if the user is there, and if it is not, we're just going to return null. Otherwise, we're going to return the content, and then the actual fetching of the data of the user only happens if a user is there, and it happens in its own component, and so it doesn't violate any rule of hooks.